Ladies and gentlemen, I'm here with Ross Wilson, a man who has created and performed a number of iconic songs defining Australia's rock history, if you like, in a number of ways, becoming a cultural icon even.
How do you define that?
Well, in every karaoke bar I've ever been to, I've always heard Eagle Rock.
We get to hear it again tonight too.
Yeah, fantastic. Ross, you've written so many of these fabulous songs. Do you feel they're God-given, or are they sweat, blood and tears?
I think it's a bit of both, really. It's always a bit of a mystery where the inspiration comes from, but on the other hand, you go, well, I know where the kind of music that I grew up listening to, that got into my brain. I guess Eagle Rock, for instance, was the first real, what could you call it, coagulation of all those things that I heard when I was growing up, and then once I got the knowledge of how to put it all together, that's what came out. But yeah, it's very much a indication of the sorts of things I listen to. So, but then again, the process is it does come from somewhere out of the air and stitches it all together. So
yeah, somehow
I don't have total control over it.
Yeah, somehow a bit like the sculptor getting the statue out of the rock kind of thing.
Yeah, but I think it's that thing where you just got to realise that there's such a thing as subconscious mind or intuition. That's always working away despite everything else you're doing. That's what creativity is governed by, I think.
When you're writing, do you have a sense of being in a sort of, I guess, a zone?
It depends what you're doing, how you're going about it. Sometimes it might be like a task you've set yourself. You might be like invited to write with someone else. Well, when I do that, I go and I say, well, it might be so and so, it might be Barnsey or something. Barnsey's making a new album. Let's go, come Ross and see if we can write some songs. So the feeling then is, well, I'm doing it for Barnsey, and yes, there'll be a lot of Ross Wilson in there, but it's kind of like a task you've been set, and you've got to come up with something good, and it's got to suit Jimmy's voice and that. So there's a bit more conscious thought involved in that than if I'm just in my room and I go, I feel something's going on, or I look through my list of titles I've jotted down that somehow say something to me, and I'll go, that one, and I'll just pick up the guitar and start, or I might have one or two lines in my head, and you start messing around, and before you know it, something unique comes out, because if it sounds too much like some other song I've written, I'll discard it straight away. So there's the ones where you're channeling your inner thing, and there's the other thing where you're trying to get some kind of psychological input and picture of the person you're working with.
Okay.
Yeah.
If you were to advise a young songwriter about, let's say, lyrics, for example, is there anything that springs to mind immediately to be able to say?
Well, you learn a lot about lyric writing. For instance, I went through periods when I first started where I know rhyming is sort of important, but it depends on the song. And I've written songs where they don't really have much rhyming scheme, but there's a rhythm to it. So the rules depend on what kind the song that you're writing. But then later on down the track, for instance, when I went off and I did some songwriting trips to America, which I'd always just sort of written within my band or with guys who were around in that scene, and then you went right with total strangers who were very good at what they do and did it for a living. That's all they did is sit around writing songs, and you pick up a few things, and I just about a year later I came back. I realised I was using rhymes a lot more because the way we wrote songs together in Nashville, that's what they do. There's much more internal rhymes and all that, and I got better at that. So, and that's a lot of fun. So it's sort of, there's a whole kind of game you have to play about finding the right word that still rhymes, and so you've got to put, you do have to sort of put yourself inside it and mess around. Sometimes it'll drive you nuts trying to find that one word, and then it won't be till I get in the studio and I'm cutting the record and like, that word still really, that shits me, like,
Yeah, bugging.
And then you'll go, just because you finally come up with something that's acceptable, and you go, thank you. I'm glad I did that.
Yeah, for sure, for sure. When you're driving down the road and one of your own songs comes on the radio, does that still give you a buzz?
Yeah, I really like that. In fact, I think one of the big moments is if you've made it, even if you say it might be the first record you've ever made, and you hear it on the radio, like that's a life-changing thing. For instance, I mean, I'd had a few records out before Eagle Rock with various groups, and we had little bits of airplay here and there, but Eagle Rock was really the big one because Daddy Cool was becoming popular around Melbourne, and the word was out around the countryside. But myself and Gary Young, the drummer, were still working. We had day gigs. We were playing as much as we could, but we still had this job packing books in a warehouse. And every month they'd pack up all these like Mills and Boons books. Was like, we've got to get them out into the newsagents. It's the whole new 10 titles of Mills and Boons. You'd be there packing for days on end. And they'd have the radio going. And we're there one day, and Eagle Rock came on the radio. Right, new track by this band, Daddy Cool. And all the guys we were working with, because they knew about the band, they went, yeah! There was this big cheer went up. And, that feeling of like hearing it and going, wow, that's what it sounds like, when you hear it on the radio. It's just, and then like 2 weeks later, both Gary and I had like walked into the office and quit our job. So that moment on that production line, packing books, when that track came on the radio, that was the point in which my life changed, because from that moment on, I've been a professional. I've always made my life from music. Yeah. That from then on. So, but yeah, every time you put out a new disc and you hope it's going to get some airplay, when you do hear it, it's like, yeah.
Was there anything you ever considered doing other than music? When you were growing up?
Not really. I mean, I did have when I left school. In my last year of secondary school, that's when I formed my first band, and we put a couple of singles out on local labels, and it did okay, and we were playing around. When I left school, I had to get a job, and I didn't really want to go to university, or wasn't interested in that. I just was interested in kind of playing the music at the weekends. And but I had enough education. I got a job with the public service, Commonwealth of Australia, and did that for about 2.5 years. And I had my own phone, and I had all kinds of stuff going on, but I was always just working at writing down lyrics when no one's watching, and I was pretty obsessed by that. So when the chance came and we were getting enough work, and by that stage I was playing a lot of original material, I took the leap, and I think that's a defining moment too, where it's like the artist starving in the garret. You've got to make that choice where you're going to do it completely. If you're really serious about it, you've got to make that leap. And of course we went out, there was a band called The Party Machine, and it had me and Ross Hannaford, who went on to Daddy Cool, and Mike Rudd, who led Spectrum and had the huge hit with I'll Be Gone. That stage we were all in this band called The Party Machine. And we went out and we went on our first tour and got completely ripped off, Now that would possibly turn people off it, but it just sort of made us more determined. As it so happened, I then went overseas for a while and came back, formed Daddy Cool. But that first step into doing it full time, that was at the point at which there was no turning back, really. Everything kind of happened from that point, and it was because there was no middle ground. I can't have my job and play music. I'm gonna just do music, and that's it.
Yeah.